All right. So we are live. Jimmy, George, how you doing?
Good.
Great.
How are
All
you?
right.
You.
Okay. Well, we are going to start in a second. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Rethink and Rebuild. My name is Andres Pesmino, and I'm your host for today. Rethink and Rebuild is a space created by Citizens Committee for New York City to bring thought leaders to discuss the recovery of New York City in the face of COVID-19. Citizens Committee for New York City is a nonprofit organization that was created back in the 1970s, 1975 to be exact, and it has become one of the oldest microgrants providers in the United States. It has become a vehicle that has democratized philanthropy and grant making to community groups in New York City, all of them grassroots organizations and community block associations and every neighbor in New York City. We traditionally have offered financial support for all of these community projects. Traditionally, we have offered our all in neighborhood grants, which have been offered to these community groups. And lately, we have created a recently introduced grant for small businesses called the Business Neighborhood Grants, Neighborhood Business Grant. Sorry. Currently, we have two important guests today. Those guests are George Arzt, who um, is a former reporter for the New York Post, former press secretary for Mayor Ed Koch, has advised government officials like President Clinton, Mayor de Blasio, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, and he has his own uh, company, Arts Communication, a full service public community and government relations. With that, we also have Jimmy Vacca, former council member from the Bronx, District 13, which covers areas like Allerton, Pelham Bay, Thrust Neck, Westchester Square, um, and is currently a distinguished professor of urban studies at Queens College. George and Jimmy, how are you today?
Great.
Great.
Great. Thank you for
Thank
having
you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
me. Thank you.
So today we come together to really talk about our community members and how we can actually hold our elected officials accountable to create a more equitable recovery throughout New York City. As we know, we are currently collecting applications for our all-in neighborhood grants, and we are here to discuss six main issue areas that we have been able to identify through all the conversations and the communications and the applications we have gathered for the past couple of years. Six main issue areas, which have been health, education, family and community, youth, economic security, and housing. So let me start with this question to the two of you. New York elected officials have just been inaugurated. It's been literally a minute. Um, Jimmy and George, let's start with you, George, and then Jimmy can jump in. Let's talk about your background in the political field and how our community groups may be able to engage elected officials. George.
Sure. I was a reporter, and so I dealt with community groups at as they came up on the steps of City Hall to protest whatever they wanted to protest. I don't feel protests are that that valuable in getting elected officials to do what they want to do. What I do feel it is that if you band together, you meet with the elected official. Um, don't let them say you deal with a staff member, deal with the official, and I think that the more people you have in your group, the more potent you are. And the politician always thinks of votes, and and that's the leverage you have with a politician. So I think that just knowing who your electeds are in the area, who's also the head of your community board. Jimmy was the head of the community board, and this makes you knowledgeable, but a very potent lobbyist. You know, in that you are an advocate for your community.
Mm-hmm. And those are very important points. And now let's talk with Jimmy, right? So you were the head of a community board, then you became a council member. Those are great, experiences to have. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Jimmy?
Well, I was a district manager to a community board for 26 years, and then I served 12 years in the New York City Council.
Mm-hmm.
This is an exciting time for government. We have a new mayor, but we also have a new city council. Most of the members there are new. And don't forget that this city council only has a 2-year term.
Yes.
So I would think that you're going to have members who are anxious to do things, who are anxious to help community people get problems resolved, who want to do constituent service. Many of them are new. They're excited. They want to see progress. So, and then with the new mayor, you're going to have many policies coming down that will affect city agencies. And when they affect city agencies, they're going to impact how city services are delivered. So I think it's an exciting time for activists in the neighborhood who want to get traffic improvements, who want to get park improvements. I think the time has come for them now to work with their local council person, engage their community board, and follow city government as new commissioners are appointed, because I do think you're going to see changes. I hope they're changes for the better. And like I said, it's a time to be engaged in the next year or so. It gives community groups an opportunity to engage their elected officials in a very unique way.
And I think that's an important point because a lot of the grantees that we work with are literally people on the ground, grassroots groups, who cares about the bread and butter, who cares about the basics of government. George, from your experience in governments as far as the past few decades, has that changed a lot in New York City as to how people are advocating to the governments?
It's only changed because there's a turnover now because of term limits. And every 8 years or 12 years, you have new people in the city council. This time you have 35 out of 51 who are somewhat new. Some have come, a couple have come back. You need to make an impression on these people. You need to be persistent. What happens is that you can't make your case and walk away. Even
Mhm.
though you seem like you're annoying people, annoy them
Yes.
until you get it done, because they'll forget about you. You'll be on the bottom of the pile.
So,
Oh yes, I remember you sent that.
Yep. I was very excited to hear Mayor Adams at one point say that he's concerned about quality of life.
yes.
Well, we've got to get back to that. I think for a long time we minimized it. Back in the 90s, I was the one here in the Bronx saying that we've got to get rid of the graffiti. It's a perception people have when they look at streets that are dirty, streets that are graffitied, garbage not picked up, abandoned cars in the street. All these things are bringing neighborhoods down. I was glad to see that the mayor is going to emphasize this. And when you emphasize it, it has to be across many agencies. They have to know that the mayor and the commissioners are committed to this. But quality of life affects you and me on the block we live on. The block we live on is the nearest context that we can relate to.
Yes.
We love to go shopping. We take our children to school. We go to a senior citizen center. But it's our block that is the context we look at. And that's where quality of life comes in, right in local neighborhoods. So I'm hopeful now that we can address quality of life issues before they become larger issues in the
Yes.
community.
The
And
most
people think no one's watching.
the most vulnerable items in the budget, libraries, parks are quality of life issues, and they're the first ones to go in austerity times. So those have to be boosted while you have a budget that is flush with money.
Mm-hmm. And with that said, I think it's important to bring data into all of these quality of life and bread and butter issues. Here at Citizen, we've been able to collect a lot of this data and being able to visualize this data on a map. So we can tell here. Let's just go on with the first issue item that we have identified. Again, there are 6 of them. The very first one is health. So let's talk a little bit more about health, right? So, and this is a great example. So, Jim, on this map, let's talk about your former district council, but still your current neighborhood in the Northeast Bronx. So Dross Neck, all that area. We have identified here that 37.22% of our applicants. I'm looking at the percentage here, as I can tell. The percentage is 100% pretty much of that area have identified health as the most important aspect issues in their neighborhoods. Health being said are food and healthy living, mental health, and physical health. Food and healthy living being the top of that subcategories. Jimmy, what can you tell us at face value about food and healthy living within these categories?
Well, I think that COVID raised the realization or brought to light the realization that we have many people living with food scarcity issues.
Mm-hmm.
People who have trouble making ends meet, and food scarcity has become a big issue, and it remains a big issue. COVID brought that to light. Now, if you look and if you shop in a supermarket, you will see prices through the roof. Inflation has reared its ugly head in a way that it hasn't in many, many, many years. A large percentage of people in my former council district are senior citizens. Senior citizens live on limited income,
Oh, yeah.
and they have to make the buck stretch. They're having increasing difficulty doing that. When you look at my neighborhood, many of the people in my neighborhood, because we live in a transit desert, we have to have a car in order to go anywhere. Well, look at the price of gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been going up continuously. So when you talk about health, you talk also about the health of the entire community. I think people are worried. Don't forget the Bronx in its entirety has the largest rate of obesity, and obesity brings about other health
Oh,
variants,
yeah.
high blood pressure, diabetes. All these things click in when you have inadequate nutrition and you eat the wrong food, or where you cannot afford to go to a supermarket and get the organic, healthy food. My whole district, we have no Whole Foods supermarket. There's no Whole Foods in the whole Bronx. There's no Trader Joe's in the whole Bronx. So when you talk about a borough like the Bronx, including my old district, looking for healthy options, they have to get in a car and go elsewhere. And many people don't even have the car to begin with. So they end up eating less healthy food, and that produces health variables. So
Mm-hmm.
when they say that they're concerned with health, I say, yes, yes, we have reason here in the Bronx and in my former district to be concerned.
George, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yes, I think what you're looking at, Jimmy has Co-op City in his district,
Oh, yeah.
and Co-op City has a huge elderly population. Then you look at the South Shore of Staten Island, that's the huge black and brown population. You also have Stuytown, Peter Cooper in Manhattan, and there the people are living with moderate income. So COVID has just exacerbated the problems of those areas. And as Jimmy said, that you've got to make these people feel more secure. Inflation has caused a lot of grief.
Mm-hmm.
for people in trying to stretch the buck. They need you need a multi-pronged approach, and in having it is very difficult. I work for a lot of developers. It is very difficult to get supermarkets
Yeah.
into projects. They just don't want to go. I'm working on something on 125th Street, where there was an old path mark. And,
I know that pathmark very well.
yes, where they're trying to attract a supermarket on Manhattan Plaza, all the way down by the Manhattan Bridge. The people in the community want a supermarket, but they can't attract the supermarket.
Yeah.
It is a terrible ordeal for many of these communities, and you need some sort of subsidy to attract supermarkets into those areas. Although the MTA has done a little bit better in the Bronx, it's still a transit desert, and the people in the Bronx can't wait for the completion of the East Side line into the Bronx.
Let me just jump on the next main issue that we have identified, not just transportation, but education.
Yes.
So in education, we have one of the largest issues that we have seen are education in STEMs and arts and culture. If we can go to actually my district in Astoria, it shows like we have about 100% of people really care about education. Jimmy, tell us a little bit more about this observation as you are an educator.
Well, we have to prepare our students for college, and many high schools in the city are not preparing students for college. Students should not be entering a college needing remediation. That remediation should occur at the high school level. And the years this has evaded the public school system. It's evaded us. We've got to get schools that are at the bottom of the reading and math scores up. We've got to improve pupil performance. We've got to make high schools and intermediate schools safer. Many parents are concerned about the safety that they send their children, the safety of the schools they send their children to. So are people concerned about education? Yes. I think that we need more after-school programs, of course. I think that we need to keep students engaged. I think that we have to look at education as a totality, not just K to 12. We've got to get our students into college. We have to make sure they can perform once they get into college and give them the skills. So parents are worried about the education system. They are. Safety and performance, and there has to be accountability. At this point, it's gone on for too long. These concerns have existed for years.
And George, let me take you to our next category, because this is a category that I'm sure you have a few thoughts about. The other category we have identified is called family and community. Within family and community, we have beautification and open spaces, and also public safety. So what are your thoughts about what we're seeing in the maps, and your thoughts in general about those categories?
Well, I think public safety is a major issue into reopening the city and into getting people to work, getting people to come into Midtown Manhattan to their offices. Every day, the newspapers have become a police blog of murders and violent crime, and people are worried about themselves. They would at the sentencing of the guy in the Morningside Heights murder, the Barnard student. It raised the issue again of sending your kids to school. Families worry about sending their kids. Which school? In older days, my mother would go from neighborhood to neighborhood to find good schools, and then we would move. So this is an issue today. Also, to Jimmy's point again, the slide of our schools has taken place over many, many mayors. And there is no one who has really come up and directed a good public school system. At one time, the school system used to have great schools. I'm glad that the mayor has put on or has pledged more gifted and talented schools. I think we need it. We need to give people a chance to get to a better education and to better colleges.
And if I can add regarding crime, I think that many parts of the city are in an emergency. And I talk about my home borough of the Bronx. Thoughts and prayers are important, but when I see a 9-month-old shot last night in the Bronx, I see a policeman shot the night before, and this continues to go on and on. Yes, there is an emergency. People read the papers, as George said. The papers have highlighted it. Boy, have they highlighted it. And they see people that are released and recidivism over and over and over again. And they're saying to themselves, we have an emergency. And I think that we have to treat it as such. And I want to give the Mayor Adams, an opportunity. I know that from what I see, this is a priority with him, and it's a priority with the people throughout the city at this point.
And I think, this is a great segue.
Remains an issue.
And this is a great segue. And since we have like 9 more minutes, let me do this a little bit faster. From education to a family and community to youth. In a few words, Jimmy, followed by George, just in a few words, what can you say about the importance of youth? And if we can move to that side of the map, please.
Oh, youth are very important. I think we have to reach our youth. I think that we have to identify youth who are at risk, and we have to provide positive services for them. We have to provide the needed mental health services for them. We have to work with their families. We need families to again come forth and help their own kids. When you're told that schools now allow children to opt in for COVID testing, but they need a parental permission form.
Yeah.
Well, only 30% of the parents allegedly return the permission form. So 70% of the children don't have the permission form. Now, the mayor has said that he's thinking of having parents opt out. Now, if they don't opt out, we assume that we can go ahead and test. That's a good idea, because then you will have more students being tested. I was the head of a school leadership team years ago in one of the schools, and parents were required by former Chancellor Green years ago to come pick up their children's report card. It was an experiment. Well, you know what happened when he did the experiment? It didn't work. Schools were left with report cards for weeks on end that parents never came to pick up. So we have to get parents to understand that they are urgent, they are important, and we have to engage the parents. We have to mandate their involvement in certain respects. I don't think it's a bad idea to require again that we require them to get the student's report card. Get them into the schools. Let them know that they're important. So some of these things that we've done in the past where we gave up and we resigned ourselves to the fact that it wasn't working, I think if we put more energy and more commitment to it, some of these strategies can work, and they should work if we want to help our kids.
And then, yes, George, go for it.
Parents need to be engaged, whether it's parent-teachers meetings, where they're picking up cards, talking to your children on how they're doing, where their problems are. And I think it's you can't do anything without parents really being compelled to look after their kids' education.
So here's something that I want to take advantage of since we have a few more minutes. Economic development. If we can go to that map real quick, we see in economic development certain area in New York City that actually are more prominent, and one of those area is actually Southeast Queens. Do any of you have any thoughts about that specifically?
I think obviously Southeast Queens is a problem area for jobs, along with the I guess it's Coney Island and the Rockaways, down on the bottom. These are areas that are badly in need of
Mhm.
economic development. It used to be in the old days, in the Koch administration, Jimmy, you remember Donald Elliott, the head of the City Planning Commission, had these master maps. Well, maybe we should not have to go back to doing those giant books, but having a master map for all these problems and looking at economic development and having the city see where they can put in task forces to help on economic development or health or homelessness.
I think also we have to look at economic development in the outer boroughs. The city is renting so much space in Manhattan. By renting space in the outer boroughs, they can save so much money and they can
Mhm.
provide us with economic development. That's a no-brainer, but we haven't done it. I think that we have to promote jobs in the outer boroughs, bring the jobs nearer to the people. And that would be an engine for us, because when you have economic development in the outer boroughs, those workers will go to the laundromats, they will go to the dry cleaners, they
Mhm.
will go to the bodega, to the deli, they will patronize local businesses. Our commercial strips, so many stores, more now than ever, are empty. COVID
Jimmy,
contributed to that, but
let me
even before COVID, we had this problem.
so let me ask you this question, and once you respond this question, I want to go to George to talk about housing. How will they advise? How will you advise as a former council member to identify people to identify issues in their communities and how to get their how to get started with that issue and really bring a change into their communities?
Well, I think that people have to engage with their local community boards, and I think city agencies have to engage with the community boards.
Mm-hmm.
The community boards represent really what I've always said are little city halls in the neighborhood. These are volunteers, and they hire a full-time district manager, and these boards are supposed to be doing that type of assessment, but they need input from local residents. They need activity.
Yeah.
In the outer boroughs, we always had civic associations. We had block associations, especially in the outer boroughs again. And I think we have to reactivate that type of citizen involvement. But I would use the community boards as the vehicle. The community boards work with the local council person. They work with the city agencies. And that's how we can initiate the assessments, identify sites,
Yeah.
look at needs. That's where we can get a local perspective on what has to be done and get resources and businesses involved.
We have 2 more minutes. George, some final thoughts, 30 seconds on that end.
I think that people need to know their elected officials, need to know how to get engaged, need to know how to go to elected officials and present their concerns, or come together with a group. I think that the best thing to do is organize. If you're going to advocate at City Hall or the State House, organize and be with a group of like-minded people.
So I'm going to answer one last question that we have here, and that is, how can we create better communication and or information sharing between city agencies as a method to mitigate some of the socioeconomic disparities we are witnessing, so resources can be better directed? Jimmy,
Yes.
a few
A
seconds.
few seconds. First of all, get a group together, delegate. No one person should be in charge of everything. Have a housing committee, an education committee, delegate. Work with the community boards, prioritize. You're not going to get everything done overnight. That's what you have to think of. You have to think of prioritizing, delegating. It's all about leadership. Like any other organization, you have to develop leadership, mentor leaders, and that's how you get the grassroots work done one step at a time, and you just move ahead, getting to know your area of expertise more and more as you delegate a person to become that expert in that field and take it on.
George?
If you come together with a group of people, the elected officials will hear you because they understand where the votes are, especially since you have a 2-year council this year, and many of the new members are not well known or just eke by in their victory. So you've got to go and make your issues known, organize.
And with that said, I want to just take a few seconds and say for anybody who is watching this video, get to know your elected officials if you haven't, read about them, keep up with what they're doing in the neighborhoods, and communicate. Not just communicate with your neighbors, communicate with your elected officials, understand how the community boards work. If you don't have the time to be part of a community board, at least get to know who those people are and see what they're doing. Because otherwise, if you don't know what's happening, there's not really much you can actually be helpful with. And if you really care about this city, and I'm sure for anybody who's watching this cares about this city, it's just a little bit of time that will require you just for a better quality of life, not just for you, but for everybody in your neighbor and in your city as a whole. With that said, I want to really appreciate the two of you. Citizens Committee would like to thank our funders and supporters to make our grants possible, including Molly Parnis, Livingston Foundation, Wells Fargo, Booth Ferris Foundation, TD Bank, National Grid Foundation, and all our generous donors. It's because of you we are able to do this work. It's because of you, Jimmy and George, join us to really amplify their voices. And anybody that comes to this show is because of everybody that comes together to form this organization and their leadership that we're able to bring resources into our communities. So please visit us at www.citizensnyc.org. The link is on the screen. And with that said, thank you very much, Jimmy, George. You are living legends, and please keep on doing the work you're doing all along because people like you are very well needed in this city. So thanks a lot, and so long.
You.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.